And according to the ncert class 12, what are chromosomal disorders? First of all, let's discuss that. Chromosomal disorders are those disorders that occur due to absence, excess of, or the abnormal arrangement of one or more chromosomes. That means in an organism, for example, let's take the example of a human being. In a human being, if there occurs the absence of a chromosome, point number one, if there occurs the excess of a chromosome, or if there happens the abnormal arrangement of one chromosome or more chromosomes, the disorder that may result in an organism is called the chromosomal disorder. Is that clear? And after that, because of the failure of segregation of the chromatids during the cell division, gain or loss of chromosomes can occur. Whenever there doesn't happen any segregation of chromatids when the cell division occurs, that may result in the gain of the chromosomes, or that may result in the loss of the chromosomes. Now, this gain of the chromosomes or loss of the chromosomes, this term is particularly called aneuploidy. Remember this as well. After that, failure of cytokinesis after telophase. Whenever there doesn't happen any cytokinesis after the telophase of the cell cycle, what may result? It may result in the increase in the whole set of chromosome. In the previous aneuploidy, we were talking about only one chromosome or two chromosomes. Clear? But over here in polyploidy, what we are talking about? We are talking about increase in the whole set of chromosome. That means not a single chromosome will increase here, but here will increase a whole set of chromosomes. Clear? And that particular condition is known as polyploidy. So remember this difference in between aneuploidy and polyploidy. Aneuploidy means loss of one chromosome or two chromosomes, or gain of a chromosome or many chromosomes. However, polyploidy is the increase in the whole set of chromosomes. This is again very important. And after that, firstly, let me tell you about the normal human being. If we talk about the normal human being, we know that in the normal human being there are 46 chromosomes, or we can say 23 pairs. Among the 23 pairs of chromosomes, or among 46 chromosomes, 22 pairs are called autosomes. ये बात भी clear है? The 22 pairs among the 23 pairs are known as autosomes, and the remaining one pair is known as sex chromosome, and these are responsible for the sexual development in an organism. Clear? But sometimes what happens is additional copy of a chromosome may be present. Instead of these 22 pairs and this one pair, there may be an additional copy of chromosomes inserted in an organism, and that particular condition is known as trisomy. Or in certain cases, what would happen? The individual may lack a copy of chromosome. Here, these are the two important cases. This is the case number one, and this is our case number two. In case number one, we studied that if the additional copy of a chromosome is present in an organism, that condition is known as trisomy. And if an individual lacks a copy of chromosome, and that condition will be known as monosomy. And this is again very important, these two terms. Now, in the ncert of class 12, some of the common examples of chromosomal disorders are mentioned there, and let's talk about them one by one. First of all, let's talk about Down syndrome. What's Down syndrome? Down syndrome is that syndrome, that disorder that's caused by the trisomy of chromosome 21st. That means there is the trisomy. What does trisomy mean? We just discussed that when there is the additional copy of chromosome inserted, that's known as trisomy. Clear? So in Down syndrome, remember this, this occurs due to the trisomy of chromosome number 21. Point number one, you should remember this point. After that, point number two that you should remember is it was first described by Langdon Down in 1866. This is again very, very important. Now, the people with the Down syndrome show many characteristic features, like that they are short stature. This is again important, you have to remember. After that, their tongue is always furrowed. After that, अगर हम उनकी palm की बात करेंगे, the palm are broad with the palm crease. तो ये इनके characteristics बन जाते हैं. ठीक, इसके अलावा यहाँ पर याद रखना, remember this thing, that in those persons who are facing Down syndrome, who are suffering from Down syndrome, they have physical, psychomotor, and mental development totally retarded. Totally retarded development of physical, or we can say psychomotor development, mental development, everything is retarded in those persons. And the second most important disorder, chromosomal disorder, I would say, mentioned in the ncert book, is Klinefelter syndrome. What's Klinefelter syndrome? This is that syndrome which occurs by the additional copy of X chromosome. That means whenever there is the additional copy of X chromosome present in an organism, the syndrome resulted is called the Klinefelter syndrome. Firstly, let's go back to the Down syndrome. Let me tell you, Down syndrome can happen in both male as well as female. It can happen in both males as well as females. Now, we were talking about the Klinefelter syndrome. This is that syndrome which occurs by the additional copy, by the presence of additional copy of X chromosome. That means whenever the additional copy of chromosome X chromosome is present in an organism, the organism is suffering from Klinefelter syndrome. And in that situation, what will be the karyotype of that organism? That will be obviously 47, and this will be XXY, because there is one more additional X chromosome present in the organism. Clear? Now, what are the characteristics of the Klinefelter syndrome? So here are some of the characteristics you should remember: masculine as well as feminine development. The person having Klinefelter syndrome, they show masculine development as well as feminine development. Now, among the feminine development, what exactly happens in those organisms? Gynecomastia development happens in those organisms. What is that? That means development of breasts happen in those organisms. And if we talk about in overall about those organisms, they are generally sterile. This is again very important point for you. Next is Turner syndrome, and this is the third type of disorder that has been mentioned in the NCERT book. What's Turner syndrome? Turner syndrome is that syndrome, that chromosomal disorder which occurs due to the absence of one of the chromosomes. When one of the X chromosome is absent in an organism, whenever the absence of one of the chromosome is absent in an organism, the organism is suffering from Turner syndrome. Now understand here, it occurs in females. Occurs in female. This is again important. Now, when there is the absence of one of the X chromosomes in a female, what would be the karyotype? The karyotype would obviously be 45 with XO, because this O is actually the 0. That means here it should have been X, but here the X is not here. The X is missing here. So the karyotype will be XO, and this will be the karyotype. Clear? Now, talking about the characteristics of those females, these females are generally sterile. And because why these are sterile? Because the ovaries present in those females are rudimentary. Plus, in addition to this, other secondary sexual characters are lacking. They do not have well-defined other sexual secondary characters. Clear? Okay. So these were the most important three disorders that have been chromosomal disorders that have been mentioned in an NCERT book. I hope you would have enjoyed the video a lot.